Welcome back, House of the Dragon fans. We are halfway through the season. These episodes are flying. Last night's episode, we light the way, another wedding, more drama. So where to begin? So many places we can start, but I gotta start with my man, Criston Cole. I don't think I've ever been more disappointed in a man in my entire life. I mean, what the hell? What is going on with this guy? I thought he was even keeled. I thought he was going to have Rhaenyra's back. I thought he was going to be dependable. He was going to be the beginning of her coalition, her right-hand man. And even after they got intimate, I was like, okay, he might catch a little bit of feelings, but he's going to realize his importance to Rhaenyra, what's going on with the crown, and play his position. I was completely wrong. This man got a taste of the cat and then just lost his mind. And we have a new term that has been entered into the lexicon, cunt struck. I definitely got to use that at some point in my real life. But yeah, that kind of sums up where he's at right now. I mean, where to start with this guy? Okay, so number one, obviously, he wants Rhaenyra to himself. He's in love. He sees a future with them. But the delusion that this man has, so as we know, before getting to the wedding and everything, he has a heart-to-heart with Rhaenyra, basically tells her that I love you. I've come up with a solution to liberate you from the crown and your obligation. And his grand plan is let's just go be nomads. Let's cross the ocean and be like beach bums. We can just cross the seven seas and just, live a life of leisure, I guess, in his mind. I don't know where the money is going to come from. I don't know if he doesn't b believe that the crown is going to come after her if she tries to abandon it. But she looks at him like he's a fool, and appropriately so. And she tries to let him down gently and tell him that I have these obligations. These are the duty to my family. And he's just not having it. He immediately breaks down. He almost treats it like an engagement in his rejection and tells her that, I'm not going to be your whore. I've already sullied myself. This is the only way I came up that I can have honor again. And I can't believe you're doing this to me, and kind of storms off. And it's just amazing that he had this type of response because, anytime you're in love or dealing with love, we've all had heartbreaks, but we know one of the cornerstones of loving somebody is willing to make sacrifices for them. You want better for them than you want for yourself sometimes. And I just can't imagine how he can't see that if he knows her like he claims he does and wants her to be happy, he should know how badly she wants this crown. Her whole life has been leading up to this. To ask her to abandon all that just to be your husband, so to speak, I mean your wife, excuse me, is insanity and almost very selfish to a degree. So he just completely lost me. He was one of the characters that I thought was really going to be, solid, a really good hand, someone that she can rely on. But all that is out the window now. His idea of honor is even more, you know, at first I was thinking like maybe Ned Stark, as far as like that delusional type of honor where you're not looking at reality. But his is worse than that because his is not only delusional, but it's violent and psychotic. One thing I was thinking about is like if this guy lived in modern times, he might be some type of stalker or something because that outburst that he had in at the wedding, I mean, he literally beat this man to death. And I know part of it, looking back on it, I watched it again. I believe part of his flipping out is the idea he didn't know how many people knows his secret now. So I think in his mind, he was thinking that any moment he's going to get dragged away and killed. Even though Alicent told him he was free to go. I think in his idea, even if he wasn't killed, the fact that everybody would know his shame or that multiple people might know his shame was just too much for him to handle. And he did the worst thing possible. And I want to know how this is going to get resolved because we saw the preview for episode 6 and we know there's a time jump. So I'm like, he not only beat this man to death before the wedding ceremony, He did it in the home of House Valerian. He put his hands on the groom to be. So there's like multiple layers of disrespect that happened here. So how is there going to be any way that he can stay alive? Because we know Corlys is going to want him dead, for disrespecting his son like that and disrespecting his house like that. So Alicent preventing him from committing suicide or harikari, the ritual suicide. I'm wondering, is he even going to stay in the kingdom? To me, she's going to have to hide him somewhere. And you can't hide him in this, in the kingdom now because everybody knows his face. My thinking is if she's going to hide him somewhere, she's going to have to send him over to the Stepstones, maybe, because nobody knows him over there. And if that's going to happen, then that might mean she's building or she has built some type of coalition that we're not aware of yet or happened in the next 10 years or so, however long this time jump is. And he's setting up camp over there because there's no way I can see him just remaining there after everything's dead. Rhaenyra's not going to trust him anymore. And everyone else is going to look at him as a madman because of the way he behaved. So he's really like a loose cannon now, and he's completely beholden to Alicent. I'm really interested to see how that dynamic is with Alicent now because she's going to have to change a lot to kind of keep somebody like that under control. We've seen some of the changes already, but she's going to have to flip the switch even more to keep a loose cannon like that under wraps. So let's go to Alicent. She's been a character that I've, loved from the beginning. Kind of loved her innocence, kind of felt she was too good for this world. The way she's being manipulated and everything, kind of felt sorry for her being pushed into the queendom, something that she didn't want. And that's kind of the irony of House of the Dragon so far. Everything that people are getting is what they don't want and is what somebody else wants, and they don't really appreciate it. So, so many people would die to be in Alicent's position, but all she wants is a friend. She wants companionship, somebody that she can talk to. All this power that she's wielding or can wield as a queen means nothing to her. And I think that also ties into the now combative or contentious relationship she has now with Rhaenyra. They thought they were going to get on the same page. They were briefly last episode, but now after what happened to her father Otto losing his status as Hand, now she realizes how naive she can be. And just like last episode, Rhaenyra had to kind of get that stern talking to from the series, telling her to basically grow up and stop acting like a child. This episode, Allison got that from her father, Otto, as he was leaving. And one thing to keep in mind, if you look at that scene again, I'm wondering if they've been stripped of all their money, their house, because he left with nothing, no carriage, no jewels, no nothing. He was on that horse with literally the clothes on his back. And I think now Allison realized the error of her ways. Her looking for a friend and all that basically shamed her father and had him lose everything. And that was a very tough lesson for her to bear. But Otto got her right. He told her, like, you need to cut the nonsense. He's like, you may not have anticipated this happening, but you should have. You are in a game for your life now. This is the Game of Thrones, basically. And he told her, if you don't get your act together, not only are you in danger, your son Aegon is going to be in danger, and any other children that you have, because your life, as it is a threat to Rhaenyra and her claim. You open your eyes and realize when she ascends the throne, it's going to be open warfare. And the first people she's going to look at to get rid of as threats to her power are going to be you and your son or any other children that you have. And are you willing to depend on Rhaenyra for mercy after she just betrayed you and got me eliminated? Think about that. And there was nothing she can say. Everything he was saying was truth. I mean, I know it's treacherous to have to live like that, but you can't make those type of mistakes. You can't put anything past anyone, especially Rhaenyra now, because she lied directly to your face, appealed to you as a sister and a confidant, and was lying through her teeth. So you cannot trust her anymore. And if you're going to survive in this world, you're going to have to do as the Romans do. You're going to have to get just as treacherous and do what needs to be done. And you see, just after that conversation, she's getting colder because you remember when Viserys was having his issues, his ongoing issues with his health, she went in there She nursed him back to health, or tried to nurse him back, and was comforting to him, giving him the sponge bath and everything. But look at the scene when he came back and he literally collapses outside of the carriage. There was no warmth in her face when she was looking from the top of the castle. That just emboldened her more about knowing what she needed to do. Because just like her father told her, the king is going to die soon, and you need to be able to step up into that power vacuum and do what you need to do. So when she saw that, I feel like that was her last sign that she needed to say, I need to hop into gear and do what I need to do. So her first step was confirming that Rhaenyra had, given up the goods, but she was able to get out of Criston. I know it shocked her that Criston was the one that actually did it and not Daemon, but she kept that piece of information and she knows how valuable that's going to be because she literally saved that man's life. She could have had him killed on the spot. So now she has somebody that was compromised that before he flipped out was going to be by Rhaenyra's side. So I know she didn't anticipate that happening, but she still has him in her back pocket, somebody that's a very capable fighter and if need be can protect her. Now, that leads to the biggest scene that we had with Alicent, her grand entry into the wedding chamber. She looked elegant, but just like the murmurings that were happening from Lionel's son, I think his name was Loras, the cripple, he was basically saying she's dressed for war. She had on the the green and she was ready and she was making a statement just by walking in there. Just the coldness that she had for Rhaenyra. She kind of just told Rhaenyra with her eyes, I know that you lied to me. And from here on out, it's warfare. It's not going to be warfare with bloodshed as far as weapons and everything, but it's going to be mental and political warfare. And as of right now, Rhaenyra is not ready for that, but Alicent is. So that was really cool to see, and it's really going to be interesting to see when we get this time jump what she's been doing the last 10 years. We already know that Old Town, the representatives from Old Town, they told her directly that we're behind you. And it was interesting that they would say that because everybody else was doing what? They were going up to the king and going up to Rhaenyra, talking about, we pledged to you and we're so happy for this marriage and everything. The fact that they would go separately to Alicent and tell her that already lets you know, just like Otto was saying, there are people out there that are ready to revolt the minute that Rhaenyra gets in power. So already Alicent has Old Town on her side, and we just have to assume she's going to keep building and building that coalition behind her and behind Aegon as the years pass. So that brings us to good old Rhaenyra. So Rhaenyra, this episode to me, she took a more passive approach as far as everything that was going on because she was so focused on the wedding and everything. She tried to get Kristen in line, but she didn't really have any opportunity to really kind of talk him down even further because she has to focus on this wedding that's coming up. Her main focus now is getting Laenor on the same page as her because she hoped by doing that she would still be able to keep her relationship with Kristen. So that was a very cool scene to see this whole idea of an open marriage with her and Laenor, who's obviously a gay man, but they're both doing their duty. And she let him know right off the bat, hey, I want you to keep doing you. I can keep doing me. We just do our obligations to the crown. No one needs to be the wiser, and we can still have our fun. And it's funny how quickly they came to that agreement. All of in a 5-minute conversation, and obviously it helped because they're related. But getting that taken care of, that was kind of a big weight off of her back. And you can tell at the wedding ceremony, she was initially going to be happy about it because she felt like she got a good understanding now. And then eventually she felt, I think in her mind, she would get Criston back on the same page with her after some of his jealousy subsided. But this was also another good example of why only the elites can play the Game of Thrones because Laenor's lover, which I'm assuming is just kind of a common guy or something like that, he mistakenly interjected himself into something he shouldn't have. He should have kept his mouth shut, played his position just next to Laenor. He didn't have to open his mouth and say anything out. This is what happens when you get to be nosy, what they say, curiosity kills a cat. Even though he was right in identifying Criston as the paramour, he did not need to confront that man. And he did it in a very smug manner, like, I even though he didn't know all the details, basically implying, I know your relationship with Rhaenyra. Here's my relationship with Laenor. As long as we play our positions, everything will work out fine. But he did not anticipate how jealous and filled with rage this man could potentially be. And unfortunately, he lost his life because of that. Just keep your mouth shut and keep things close to the vest. That's the main thing you should be learning from House of the Dragon. So this was a classic Westeros wedding. Not as bad as the Purple Wedding. Well, the Purple Wedding wasn't bad because Joffrey needed to go, but not as bad as the Red Wedding. But this was more of a kind of like a reality show wedding. I don't think any of us were rooting for anyone. We were just sitting back and kind of enjoying the spectacle of it all. And that leads me to our next person who is always covered in drama, our good friend Daemon. Now he started off the episode with just his usual drama, and we finally got to see his wife that he's had so many bad words about, calling her a cunt, calling her a bitch. And we didn't get none of that when we met her. Rhea is actually a very capable woman. She's a hunter. She's willing to do anything that she needs to do on her own, very independent, very self-assured. But that explains to you why Damon has so many problems with her, because he only likes women that he can manipulate and control. And even though we only got a few minutes with Rhea, you can tell right off the bat she is not that type of woman. But the way he was talking about her, you would think that she was unattractive and ugly. She looked perfectly fine, perfectly attractive woman. But because, Damon cannot dominate her, he had all this anger for her. And we find out, of course, their marriage was never consummated. When she sees him, they start going back and forth at her. She's trading insults at him. She's basically dressing him down as far as where his status is now. And we find out very quickly, just as Rhaenyra did a second too late, that Daemon was there to take her out of the picture. So we get a very uncomfortable scene where he makes her fall off her horse, breaks her neck, and is laying there paralyzed from the neck down with no way to defend herself. And the last thing that she can do is still curse him, and she makes one last dig about he can't finish, which of course is implying his impotence that comes around sometime. And unfortunately, that was just the wrong thing to say to seal her fate. So he bashes her head in, and luckily we didn't get to see that on camera. But it's another reminder of how vicious he can be, as we've already known. We've seen that with some of the men he's encountered on the battlefield, but we know he's very capable of doing that to any women that he feels no longer serves his purpose. So that is kind of terrifying to think about because we know how women are attracted to him. He has this very magnetic personality. He exudes, I guess, sex appeal in that society. So the women are drawn to him. So the next woman that's drawn to him was Lena, the now grown up Lena that was initially supposed to be betrothed to Viserys. So she can't take her eyes off of him in the wedding hall. So I'm very worried about her because she was just following him around smitten. Even though he he tells her that, it's no big deal that my wife has died. You can figure that'd be a red flag for any woman, but this girl is just, her nose is wide open. So this is another woman that may potentially fall under Daemon's spell and put herself in danger. And then, of course, we have Rhaenyra. Now, these two, the sexual tension between these two is very uncomfortable, being that they're number one, they're related. They're uncle and niece, but she's all up in his face talking about if you want me, you can, talking about Rhaenyra, if you want me, you can come take me. You can have your soldiers come in here and drag me back off to a runestone if you wanted to. So I don't think we're done with them yet. I mean, I was hoping that one little close sexual encounter that they had, that might be the end of it, but I don't think that is. There's just too much tension there. So who knows where we're going to be with them 10 years from now or 5 years from now, whenever the time jump is with the next episode. But we know with Damon, he's consolidating his power as well. And that's one thing we saw in the wedding hall. Everybody doing their little maneuverings and whisperings. So we got a little bit of Damon's plan. With Rhea out of the picture and no heirs between them, he's going to inherit Runestone. So he's going to have that place. He has the gold cloaks at King's Landing that are still loyal to him. I'm not sure what's going to go on with the Stepstones because even though they called him the King of the Narrow Sea, he hasn't been over there in years, but potentially he still might have ties over there. So that's going to be his claim to the kingdom, I believe, once Viserys kicks the bucket. So now that I mentioned Viserys, how is this man still living? If you look at him in this episode, he looks like he walked off the set of The Walking Dead. His arm is literally rotting, like half the arm is rot. He looks half dead, hair is starting to thin, can barely stand up, coughing up blood. I don't think he has any fingers left. If he does, he might only have like three or four total between both hands. I was shocked at that preview that showed he was still alive because I was like, he's going to be gone in the next episode or two. But he's hanging on. One thing he wanted to see through was this wedding. But I think he's realizing that the walls are closing in. The tenderness that he had previously with Alicent, he's realizing that she's moving away from him. He no longer has Otto. He did make a wise choice in making Lionel his hand. And I was really impressed with Lionel, but we'll go there in a second. I'm going to focus more on the series. His physical weakness is really emboldening everyone around him. He can barely talk for more than a minute or two without coughing. And we know Corlys noticed that when they came into the throne room, and Rhaenys, his wife, noticed that. So they know the king is weak, and they know they have to move quickly to try and consolidate whatever power they want to do. And the most interesting scene with the series is when he had that negotiation, if you want to call it, for marriage with Corlys and Rhaenys about wanting their son to marry Rhaenyra. Now, Corlys was with it, but here's the problem I always have with Corlys. I think he tips his hand too quickly because he gets a little emotional and he's very passive aggressive, which is not something you want to do in politics. First mistake he's made was not greeting Viserys at the gates. That was a sign of disrespect right there. So now you have Viserys walking into the throne room with a little bit of an attitude. He might have been a little bit more conciliatory with some of the requests that Corlys was making if he hadn't initially had that disrespect at the gates. So now when they're talking about, well, how are we going to negotiate? Because, Corlys was saying normally when someone ascends the throne and there's marriage, that the heirs will take the last name of the male. So in this case, Corlys is in his mind thinking, the next king might be, King Valerian. And Viserys corrects that very quickly. He's like, yeah, normally, but I'd named Rhaenyra the heir. So the heir is going to be a Targaryen because Targaryens are going to continue to reign. So everyone else after the firstborn, they can have the Valerian last name, but the next king is going to be a Targaryen. So, and Corlys had no choice but to accept that. You can tell by Viserys' face that was not up for negotiation. And there's one funny moment when he talked about, Viserys made a line about, how women are not respected or considered worthy of the throne. There was this moment where you see Rhaenys in the background. She has like this kind of dry smile because it reminded her of her situation where she was the queen that never was. And I think she's over it, but every now and then when it gets brought up, there's still a little bit of sting there. The whole idea that you're willing to make your daughter heir, but I couldn't get what was rightfully mine when they had the council, and she could have been queen. And I feel like that kind of drives a lot of Corlys's motives because he mentioned to her that, you were wrong and I'm trying to correct this wrong for my family because we were supposed to be on the throne. But she tells him that you can't think like that because you're going to make unwise moves. We know there's going to be warfare eventually when Rhaenyra gets on the throne, and we have to protect ourselves because now that we've agreed to put our son with Rhaenyra, that's going to put him in danger because depending on who's around him, you know, he's going to be one of the first ones they try and kill, any of the rebels. And, Corliss is still thinking, well, I have a navy, I have this, I have that. And she's like, none of that will matter if you don't see where the attack is coming from. And one thing that she did say, which kind of surprised me, is that she feels that the whole queen that never was thing, she's over it and she put it to bed. Because I always kind of thought she may be like a Littlefinger type character where she was like working in the shadows to try and regain power and maybe manipulate Rhaenyra. But it seems like maybe she doesn't have any motivation to do that. And maybe her motivation is simply now making sure her family stays alive, when the eventual warfare comes. So that might be a little bit off with her Rhaenys. I thought she was a little bit more devious, but we shall see. We're still only halfway through. So one last person I wanted to touch on would be Lionel, the new king, or new hand of the king. Now, if you look at some of my recaps, I believe 1 or 2 videos ago, I talked about how much I like Lionel because I felt he was the only one that told the king the truth and was the only one that has the king's best interests at heart. I feel everyone, including Otto, were maneuvering around and trying to manipulate the king as best they could. Lionel doesn't have any of that. He's very logical and you can tell he genuinely cares for the king. And because of that, I felt his life was in danger. I felt that eventually he was going to be one of the first ones they try and take out because he's so valuable to the king. However, one thing I did see that kind of made me hopeful for him is that when the fighting started in the wedding hall between Criston and Rhaenyra got knocked down and no one can get to her, he looked over at Sir Harwin, I believe his name is, and gave him a nod, basically telling him you need to go to work and get the queen to be. And Sir Harwin, he cleared that place out. He was knocking everybody out, one man army, and got Rhaenyra and got her back to the banquet table. So that to me lets me know that at least he has somebody strong in his back pocket than Harwin. He might be the most formidable fighter on the Kingsguard. I thought it was Criston, but the way he cleared everybody out with no weapons, just hand-to-hand combat, and was able to get Rhaenyra out of there. If Lionel has someone like that on his side, there may be hope for him to get out of this season. And I'm hopeful because Lionel, he seems to be giving really good advice. So once we get this time jump, I want to see how he's interacting as far as if he's still dedicated to the king or is he switching allegiances between Alicent or maybe Rhaenyra, looking forward to the regime to come. So that sums up pretty much everything for this episode. We light the way. Or one thing I did forget to mention, how somber and sad it was, after Laenor's lover got killed. He's crying there, and then they still have the wedding ceremony afterward in an empty banquet because Viserys wanted to get this done. They're both teary-eyed and they're both sad because essentially they both lost who they truly love. Laenor's lover is dead, and I know Rhaenyra knows that she's probably lost Criston forever now because there's no way he can still be around the court after this. And she's probably still in the back of her mind wondering if her secret is going to be exposed. And if it does get exposed, what does it do for her future claim as queen? So a lot to digest. I'm looking forward to the jump, but I really wanted to see the immediate aftermath of how this wedding is talked about and what gossip goes around about it. So we're kind of going to miss all that. Everything that we're going to get next episode is going to be so far in the future. I'm pretty sure they're going to reference it because this is a hell of a wedding. So we know the common people are going to talk about it, but it would have been cool to see the immediate aftermath of everything. And one more thing I wanted to add, I'm going to very much miss Emily Carey and Millie Alcock, who did Alicent and Rhaenyra. I think they did a phenomenal job. I'm totally invested in them now, and I really wanted to see their journey continue. So they've really set the bar high, very high now. So it's going to be very difficult for the adult Rhaenyra and the adult Alicent to come in and take over for them, because as far as I'm concerned now, Rhaenyra and Alicent are them. So it's a little bit of a risk to me switching over like that in the middle of the season, but based on what we've seen so far, I'm very confident in the showrunners. They're going to be doing a very effective jump, but I'm going to miss those two. And I know I'd never seen them before, so I'm hoping that we'll get to see them again in a lot more roles and a lot of other projects because they did a phenomenal job with these characters. So that is my recap of episode 5. Let me know what you guys think. Anyone that you're behind, any favorites? Do you see how this second potential half is going to come out? I haven't quite figured out who's going to make it and who's not. I don't think Alicent and Rhaenyra are both going to make it together because to me, the kingdom is going to be split between them and the claims. So I don't know which one. I just know I'm going to be sad if either one of them, passes away. But I feel like with the warfare that's going to happen, they both can't make it. Now, what I'm also looking forward to is I'm assuming with this jump, we're going to have more kids from the preview. So now we got to figure out who is who. As far as like who's Aegon, who are these other kids, so I'm wondering if they're going to be teenagers or if they're going to be grown. And then the big thing I'm looking forward to is the stepstones. We had that big battle in episode 3 where the crab feeder died, but we heard in that preview that Daemon had been gone, I believe, for like 10 years. And who knows what's been happening over there? Because basically, I do remember they killed like 2,000 rebels and put them on the beach. So you essentially they destabilized that whole region and left it in ruins. So who knows who's came up behind them in power and what they think about the throne now? Are they going to be ready for war? Have they been anticipating war? So they mentioned some type of problem in the stepstones. So the problem that might be there now has been festering for 10 years, or has it been? Because, I mentioned if Alicent sent Criston Cole over there to hide, there may be some other type of coalition that's ready to help Alicent steal the crown away. But anyway, that's a topic for another day or another Sunday once we get episode 6. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you next Monday with our next recap.